Imagine opening a filing cabinet and finding your own name, your address, your daily routine, who you slept next to, what you whispered behind closed doors. The East German secret police had a file on you, even if you'd never set foot in East Germany. By the end of this, you'll understand how one secret police force built the most sophisticated surveillance state in human history, how they nearly destroyed every record of it, and why the files they left behind broke apart families, ended careers, and rewrote everything people thought they knew about their own lives. East Germany. The German Democratic Republic. To the outside world in the 1950s, it looked like a country rebuilding itself from the rubble of the Second World War. Apartment blocks going up. Factories running. Children in school uniforms marching in neat rows. But underneath all of it, something else was being built. In 1950, the Ministry for State Security was formally established. In German, Ministerium für Staatssicherheit. The Stasi. And from its very first day, its mission wasn't just to catch spies. Its mission was total knowledge. Total control. Total surveillance of every single citizen it claimed to protect. By the time the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, the Stasi had a full-time staff of 91,000 officers. That's one agent for every 63 citizens. But here's where the number gets truly disturbing. When you add in the unofficial informants, the inoffizieller Mitarbeiter, or IMs, that number explodes to nearly 600,000 people actively spying on their neighbors, their co-workers, their own families. Think about that. In a country of 16 million people, roughly 1 in 30 was feeding information to the secret police. Your neighbor. Your pastor. The woman who sold you bread on Tuesday mornings. The KGB, the Soviet secret police, widely considered the most feared intelligence agency on Earth, once studied the Stasi. And they were impressed. They called it the most effective secret service in the Eastern Bloc. Not because the Stasi had better technology, but because they had perfected something far more powerful than technology. They had perfected paranoia. The Stasi didn't just follow people. They got inside people's lives in ways that feel almost unbelievable now. Mail was a primary tool. Every single letter passing through the East German postal system was subject to interception. The Stasi had entire departments whose only job was to steam open envelopes, photograph the contents, reseal them so perfectly that the recipient would never know, and file the information away. Tens of millions of letters. Decade after decade. Then there were the smell samples. This is not a joke. The Stasi developed a technique for collecting and storing the unique body odor of their surveillance targets. Officers would wipe a cloth across a suspect's chair after an interrogation, or break into their home and run fabric across their belongings. These cloths were sealed in glass jars and stored in the archive. The idea was that trained dogs could later identify a fugitive by scent alone. There were shelves upon shelves of these jars. Hundreds of them. Each one labeled with a name, or just a number. But the most effective tool wasn't technology at all. It was a psychological method the Stasi called Zersetzung. Decomposition. Corrosion. The deliberate, slow destruction of a person's inner life. If the Stasi decided you were a threat, not necessarily a criminal, just a thinker who asked too many questions, a writer whose words felt a little too honest, they didn't arrest you. That would create a martyr. Instead, they dismantled you quietly. They would break into your apartment and rearrange your furniture. Subtly. Just enough to make you doubt yourself. They'd forward your mail to the wrong addresses. Cancel your appointments without telling you. Spread rumors among your colleagues that you were an informant, the cruelest possible irony. They would make you feel like you were losing your mind, while keeping meticulous notes on every crack that appeared. The goal wasn't imprisonment. The goal was to make you disappear from the inside. For nearly 4 decades, the Stasi filed everything. Reports. Transcripts. Photographs. Handwritten notes from informants. Tape recordings. Medical records. Sexual histories. Every embarrassing secret. Every private grief. By 1989, they had accumulated 111 kilometers of paper files. If you laid every page end to end, it would stretch from Berlin to Prague. They had files on 6 million East German citizens. And that wasn't all. They had files on a further 2 million people in West Germany and other countries, politicians, journalists, businessmen, activists. People who had no idea a dossier existed with their name on it, sitting in a locked room in East Berlin. Some files ran to thousands of pages. For a single person. Documenting decades of their life in obsessive, bureaucratic detail. What you ate. Who visited. What you said in your sleep, according to a spouse who had been recruited without your knowledge. But here's what they never told you in the history books. The Stasi didn't just collect information. They used it as a weapon. They would approach a target and let them know, subtly, devastatingly, that everything was known. Every secret. Every sin. The message was never spoken aloud. It didn't need to be. You were known. You were owned. And then the wall came down. On the night of November 9, 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. And somewhere in Stasi headquarters, the shredders started running. What happened in those final weeks, what was destroyed, what survived, and what was found inside those files when citizens finally broke down the doors, that's where this story gets genuinely strange. But before we get to that, you need to understand something about how close the entire archive came to disappearing forever. Because the Stasi had a plan. And it almost worked. The moment the wall fell, Stasi officers across East Germany received informal orders. Destroy the evidence. Everything. They worked around the clock. Industrial shredders ran so hot and so long that they melted down and had to be replaced. When the shredders failed, officers tore documents apart by hand. Entire rooms filled with garbage bags stuffed with shredded paper, hand-torn fragments, ash. In the weeks between November 1989 and January 1990, the Stasi destroyed an estimated 45 million documents. But they couldn't destroy fast enough. On January 15, 1990, citizens who had been living under the shadow of that building their entire lives, pushed through the gates of Stasi headquarters in Berlin. They stormed the offices. They saw the bags. They saw the shredders still warm. They realized what was happening and they stopped it. What they saved was staggering. 16,000 bags of hand-torn documents. Millions of fragments. Scattered across the floor like confetti at the funeral of a dictatorship. For years, those bags sat in storage. The puzzle was considered unsolvable. 45 million pieces of paper, hand-torn, mixed together. Then a team of German archivists started piecing them back together. By hand. One fragment at a time. It would take, they estimated, 375 years to complete at that rate. So they built a machine to do it instead. When East Germans were finally given the legal right to view their own Stasi files in 1992, nothing could have prepared them for what they found. The files didn't just confirm that they'd been watched. They revealed who had been watching them. Mothers who had reported on their own children. Husbands who had filed detailed accounts of their wives' private thoughts. Best friends who had submitted weekly written summaries of conversations shared over dinner. Priests who had informed on their congregations. One woman opened her file and found hundreds of pages of meticulous surveillance reports. Then she recognized the handwriting. It was her husband's. The man she had spent 30 years with. The man she had trusted completely. He had been filing reports on her since before they were married. A pastor in Leipzig discovered that 3 members of his inner circle, men he had prayed with, confided in, protected, had each been independent informants reporting on him separately without knowing about the others. A dissident writer found that her closest friend, who had wept with her at the wall when it finally fell, had been the primary Stasi source responsible for her 2 years of imprisonment. These weren't monsters. That's what made it unbearable. These were ordinary people, caught in a system that offered them small rewards, an apartment upgrade, a better job, protection for their own family, in exchange for betraying the people closest to them. The files didn't just rewrite history. They rewrote relationships. Marriages ended. Friendships dissolved overnight. Entire communities fractured along fault lines that have been invisible for decades. And here is the detail that will stay with you. Some people chose never to open their files. They were given the right. They were given the access. And they said no. Because some truths are too heavy to carry. Today, the Stasi archive in Berlin holds more than 111 kilometers of surviving documents, 1.75 million photographs, and 30,000 video and audio recordings. It employs hundreds of archivists. Millions of people have now requested access to their own files. The piecing together of the shredded documents continues. As of the mid-2010s, a computer-assisted program called the ePuzzler had reassembled fragments from over 400 of the 16,000 bags. The project is ongoing. New secrets are still surfacing. Germany made a deliberate choice to confront this history rather than bury it. The Stasi Records Act, the public archive, the trials of former officers, all of it was a conscious decision to force a reckoning. To not let the machinery of surveillance quietly fade into footnotes. Because the lesson the Stasi leaves behind isn't really about East Germany. It's about what happens when a government decides that knowing everything about everyone is a matter of national security. It's about what ordinary people will do when a system makes betrayal feel like survival. And it's about what gets lost, when we stop asking who is watching, and why. The Stasi are gone. The files remain. And somewhere in those 111 kilometers of paper, there are still names. Still secrets. Still fragments of lives that were watched without consent and recorded without mercy, waiting to be read. The archive is open. The question is whether we're paying attention to what it's telling us. If this broke your brain a little, subscribe. We drop one of these every week. Next week, the night the Soviet Union almost launched nuclear war by accident, and the one man who decided not to pull the trigger.